to thank our industrial panel for agreeing to participate today. We have Bill Kelly with us, who's the CFO of Diamond Ventures. He's responsible for project and corporate financing. In addition, he heads the company's commercial division, which consists of a portfolio of industrial, office, retail, and mixed use and hospitality assets. Bill has more than 27 years of commercial real estate experience. Thank you, Bill. We have Rob Glazer with us. He's a principal and has been at Picor for the past 30 years as an industrial real estate broker. He holds both the SIOR and CCIM designations, and he's brokered over 2,000 leases and sales and over 30 million square feet of industrial space in the Tucson market. Thank you, Rob. And Bill DeVito is a first vice president with CBRE and a specialist in office, industrial, and investment properties since 1984. He brings diverse marketing skills and in-depth knowledge of the region's economies to effectively achieve his clients' real estate goals. Bill has been a consistent top performer since he began with CBRE. And we had a late addition, and I want to thank you, Michael Guyman, for agreeing to participate. Michael's a native Tucsonan. You may remember him as the former executive director of Metropolitan Piedmont Alliance, and he currently is the director of economic development for Sun Corridor. And his position focuses on the expansion and attraction of business. So thank you very much to everybody. First question I have is, we spent a lot of time talking about the Tucson market. Obviously, we drilled down into that in that report. But are there any potential national trends that you see developing that could be opportunities for the Tucson industrial market?
The trends that I've been following and that I've been having discussions with clients outside of the Tucson area are what I would call decentralization. So during the recession, what had happened was we had a flight to the core markets, and within those core markets, there was concentration of employees, job growth. Consequently, things became congested, things became extremely expensive, and there's a little bit of a pushback from employees who cannot afford to live in these areas, Seattle, Silicon Valley, et cetera. They can't travel from point A to point B. You know, I attended a forum at the University of Washington, and the execs from Microsoft were on the board, and it took them almost 2 hours to get from their campus down to UW. And the feedback and the trend that I think is going to happen, and hopefully Tucson will be prepared for it, is people they're going to want a different lifestyle. They're going to get fed up with sitting in traffic for an hour and a half. They're going to get fed up with having to bunk up with other people because they can't afford to live near where they're working. And so consequently, they're going to start looking at smaller markets. And especially with the development of new technologies, and which means the types of jobs that are being created today are not the types of jobs that we lost in 06 and 07. Those jobs can happen anywhere. So the trends that I think that Tucson can capitalize on is the millennials, high-tech, smart, young professionals that want a better lifestyle, and they can work just about anywhere that they want to work. And so I think the focus is going to be downtown, U of A, that whole area. That's the concentration where I believe is going to be the future of Tucson.
Yesterday, Steve Cohen and I were on what Cushman and Wakefield calls Tenants in the Market. And it's a report, a national report, where brokers from 5 of the major markets talk about the activity, the industrial activity in their market. The first report was on the Inland Empire, the Ontario Riverside, just massive industrial real estate market. And I don't know if this could influence Tucson. I think it has for years influenced distribution facilities in the West Phoenix area. But it was interesting. They had reported in that market that activity, closed activity, was down by about 40%. Yet the demand for industrial facilities was consistent with the trend that's been existing for a number of years. The demand was in the area of 32 million square feet of demand on the ground looking for facilities. In the Inland Empire now, land costs are in the $20 to $30 a square foot range. When Home Goods came to Tucson and committed to Tucson, I know part of their commitment was the low-cost labor present in this market, the lower cost of land, the lower cost of doing business, and felt that they can serve the 220 stores that they needed to service. Target has a very successful fulfillment, about 1 million square foot fulfillment center here in Tucson as well. So could things start to shift? Could some of that, activity start moving into our market? It's a possibility. Be interesting to hear from Michael, who kind of answers those calls if they've seen that sort of increase in activity.
Is there anything that Tucson can or should be doing that would allow it to better capitalize on those national trends and bring some of these companies and businesses to Tucson?
So I just want to focus on some comments that Bill made about companies coming into this market and the types of amenities that they're looking for. I agree with him that there are some trends that relate to these companies kind of wanting to find a new environment. But those new environments better have the labor and talent that those companies can be assured that they will have and see in that market. So I'm hosting a site selector next week. He's going to be in town for 2 days, looking at properties, talking to employers. This would be a great opportunity for Tucson, 750 employee project that he's working on. Whenever a site selector comes into town, and by the way, Tucson is going to be the host city of the 2017 Site Selector Conference, where 46 of the top site selectors are going to be in our backyard for 3 days a year from now. And this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to really showcase our region to these gatekeepers. These are individuals that companies hire to help them with these types of expansion and relocation decisions. But when I had the site selector in Home Goods, or for Home Goods in town, I asked, of all you've been doing this for 30 years, of all the projects that have crossed your desk, how many times, what percent does Tucson make the first cut? And he said, probably about 40% make the first cut. I said, 40%, okay, that's not terrible. But of those 40%, or so the 60% that don't make the first cut, why? And he said, top 2 reasons. Workforce, those companies that he's working with, he just knows that Tucson just doesn't have the type of workforce that those individuals need. And the second is air service. Those are the 2 biggest barriers to him. I will be asking the same question of the site selector who will be in town next week. But it's just absolutely critical that as we work with these companies that are looking to have maybe expansions into smaller markets, Rob pointed on things that are improving, and the report reported on things that are improving in terms of downtown improving, things that are becoming more attractive, but it's still a challenge. I still have companies here like Accelerate Diagnostics, which is a wonderful company. They came here with 15 employees. They now have 125 high-tech, $90,000 a year job, average job employees, but they still have a challenge attracting the type of talent that they need. But things like that will help that. So I think it's a mix of making sure that we're working with the higher educational institutions to provide the type of skills that the industry not only here needs now, but the skills for the future workforce, as well as making sure that we're addressing, and I know George Boots is here from the airport, and Steve Cole, who is the former chair of the TAA board, working hard to make sure that we're improving the air service, and then the other amenities that relate to what the young employee, what the young worker is looking for in a community.
Thank you. I've heard a word more and more frequently recently that I think would have been unfathomable even a few years ago, and that's spec construction in the industrial market. So I kind of want to touch on that, and Bill, maybe if you can address this from an investor, developer's perspective. Do you think we will see spec construction in the industrial market in the near future? And if not, or if so, what type of criteria as an investor, developer, do you need to see before that actually happens?
Diamond Ventures has about 500 acres of industrial employment land, mostly in the southeast and south of the airport area, and we're looking very closely at that right now. And so what we're really doing is we're teeing it up so that we have a range of product types, a range of locations that will fulfill a need that is a delivery time schedule very important. So when someone comes to town or a business wants to expand, we hope to have a turnaround process of about 90 to 120 days, to where we'll do some pre-engineering of the buildings. We'll have a prototype that we can bring forward. We'll have a fully improved and fully improved site and fully improved development plan for that site. So we're looking to do that. The challenge is the math. Even with our low basis in our land, the math is very difficult for financing to do any kind of a pure spec. We're going to take it to a very near development level, and then hopefully that will push people over the edge to commit to a site, and then you can build. I think pure spec is going to be few and far between. I don't see Tucson is going to be challenged with that. I don't think you're going to see a Rockefeller anytime soon to build a spec building like they did before. And then there's all the different product types. If you have pre-engineered steel buildings versus tilt construction, that there's the cost difference is significant. So you've got to be careful of that as well.
How about our brokers on the panel? Do you feel like we'll see spec construction anytime soon? And if so, where are kind of the logical areas in our market where it might make sense in the near future?
To answer your question, no, I don't believe you'll see any of your typical type spec building, your R&D flex, your warehouse building. As Bill mentioned, you saw the numbers up there. That quick analysis ran 85 cents, 68 cents, $100 a square foot, and our rents are sitting at $662 with very little demand. I think you also saw that most of the demand is in spaces for less than 25,000 square feet, and those spaces are very, very low in terms of lease rates. So given the projected job growth of Tucson, which was 0.04%, and then we're projected to be 1.4% through 2018. So we have no job growth, very little job growth. However, having said that, if I was to build a spec building, I know where it needs to be it needs to be between the U of A and downtown. I mean, that's where the action is. That's where people want to be. That's the companies that I talk to. They want to be able to access the university. They want not only the people, they want to access the technology that potentially could be available, I know that Joaquin Ruiz is working very hard to be able to open the doors to some of the laboratories to private sector people, so they don't have to duplicate the work, but duplicate space so they can go in and test things. And I know that the human resource of the population there, people still in school, they want to be able to have a lifestyle. So they want to be able to go downtown, maybe they have a beer and a hamburger and they go back and work till 2 a.m. So if we were to take some of the land that everybody wants to build high-rises, or everybody wants to put a retail restaurant in it, and the things that are being developed in West U of A all the way to downtown and west of the freeway, and those would be the areas, the key areas, where I think you could make something pencil, and you'd have the demand, and you'd be able to do some pre-leasing. The challenge is trying to assemble property at a reasonable rate, because everybody that has a piece of dirt wants to go and build, 10-story, 14-story. They want to get as much money as they possibly can, and these R&D guys can't afford to pay that kind of rent. Maybe they'll pay $15, but they're not going to pay $22, $23. So, yeah, if you want to build spec, concentrate and focus university downtown. That's where you should do it. Otherwise, like Bill said, it's gonna be what he's gonna do is basically get everything teed up. So he'll have a schedule, he'll have a construction cost. So when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I need an 80,000 square foot building," Bill's gonna drop it on a certain piece of dirt, and he's already gonna have his pricing, and so he'll be able to quote the guy either a purchase price or a lease rate, and he'll be able to provide him a schedule. But that's still going to be 9, 10, 12 months out or 14 months out. And then you have to negotiate the lease. And we all know what a nightmare that is. I mean, you could take 4 to 5 months just to negotiate the lease. So anything to say?
Rob, did you have any thoughts on spec construction and where that might happen in our market?
I think in the Northwest, from Grant and I-10 going north to about Ruthroff and I-10. The largest submarket in Tucson is the Northwest submarket at over 9 million square feet. Vacancy today stands at 5%. We've experienced over the last 18 months about a 12% increase in rents, mostly for smaller space from 1 to 5,000 square feet. If you can find the land, if you can find reasonably priced land, I think in the next 3 years, you can build a functional bay and have reasonable success in leasing that at the kind of lease rates you would need to achieve a reasonable return.
But who would build it? Who would build a spec?
At every market turn, you wonder who was the developer. Rockefeller wasn't here, prior to 2009. There's someone there. And I think in all markets, even in like the mid 80s, late 90s, Kemmerly, when they built that project out by the airport, whoever thought Kemmerly would build that, of course, today he, would like to forget that as well. But there are developers out there. It's their business. Some are better than, obviously, some are better than others. So we probably don't know today who that builder is.
Any questions from the audience?
Rob and Bill, what are your predictions for year-end vacancy?
Everybody hear that? What are your predictions for year-end vacancy?
Today it stands at about 9%. I'd say probably about 8.5%. And I think the interesting thing about it is that there's a lot of functional obsolescence in Tucson, and you couple that with the large vacancies. There's like 9 buildings over 100,000 square feet that probably represent close to half of that vacancy. So in certain sectors of the market, it's getting pretty well occupied. you know, mostly again the smaller space.
To piggyback on what Rob mentioned, in order for our vacancy rate to make any movement, you know, you're going to have absorption. And when all our vacancy is in either obsolete buildings or in large buildings, which Sarah mentioned, very, very little demand for 100,000 square foot and above buildings. So I see very, very little change in the vacancy without absorbing some of our big buildings. And at this point, I don't see that. I don't see anything on the horizon that's going to tell me that we're going to all of a sudden start absorbing 100 and 200,000 square foot buildings.
I think we have time for one more question.
In the presentation, I've taken out a slide for time purposes, but there's currently 3.8 million square feet of vacant space. And the report talks a lot about the functional obsolescence of about 5%. If you apply that to the inventory, it's about 2 million square feet of that 3.8. So, you know, the market has tightened up if you take that out of it.
Question here. My Ramsey. I'm really an outsider to this group. I'm a guest of Bill Viner, and I'm listening to this. And first of all, I just want to say, very, very impressed by the work Paul and Sarah and the presentation. Unbelievable. Great presentation. Great presentation. But when I'm listening to this, and I'm in financial services, my specialty is not necessarily in any way connected with real estate, but I'm listening to the issues which you've identified very, very well. You know what the problems are. You know what the solutions are to a lot of extent, you know, in terms of really turning the corner to try to make things happen. So when I hear you talk about like you're going to have somebody come out to explore sites, do we ever coordinate like a full-blown team approach to try to get this business? So what do I mean? So we've identified issues with perhaps education. You know, have someone with the university based on the business that we're trying to have come here, you know, look at what are their specific needs and what are their requirements in terms of a workforce. Could we get a commitment from different educational entities to try to help that business to try to make that happen, to try to commit to hiring professors in certain areas, to try to get you know, placements in terms of internships and work study programs. We have somebody here from the airport. You know, if they're going to need and require transportation, you know, can we do something to try to say, okay, you know, if you commit to this kind of an investment in our community, you know, we're going to try to work with this, and if we have to do some things to try to make those routes that are non-existent available and make them happen, this is going to be a coordinated, you know, interest, not just in terms of developing this piece of property, but as a community on the whole to try to make this happen. You know, there's other things that we could do. We have resources, we have connections with all the different aspects of what a business needs to come here, to become a part of our community. It doesn't just have to be you guys working on your own to try to bring somebody in. And I'm wondering, you know what all of these issues are, why aren't we working together more and really try to make this happen as a team? And I'm sorry, I'm not sad. It makes me mad when I hear that we have these opportunities and they're available. We should be getting them, period.
Sure. I think that's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. I can't do this alone. I know I can't do this alone. Whenever we have a site selector in, whenever we have company representatives in, we put together the best team we possibly can. This site selector next week is going to be sitting down with U of A officials, with workforce officials, with like companies so that he can have a peer-to-peer conversation. And we do this all the time. Home Goods, Rob and I were kind of attached at the hip, well, and actually Bill as well, amongst many, many other individuals in this community that sat down with that company to make sure that they knew they could answer every single question that company had. And that company, and this is not uncommon, what we hear from site selectors and company reps when they come here, whether or not we land the project, is how coordinated we actually are. They really like that we have been able to assemble such a large team, and some of the companies have commented that they don't experience that in some other markets. So I think that we have put together a great approach. At the end of the day, if it's a great match, they come, excellent. If not, sometimes we hear that feedback, sometimes we don't. When we hear that feedback, like I did with the site selector, there are certainly things that we can fix, and we are working with our partners to fix those. But, and I'm going to take a little step aside, because it's also stated in the report that sometimes we need to take care of the problems ourselves. And when things like bond elections come up, and when this community isn't willing to invest in itself to fix these problems, then we can't solve them.
I agree with you 100%, and when you do this, the next time with these bond issues, all of us need to work together. That cannot happen again. That was a disaster.
Agreed.
Well, I think the community would be willing to invest in themselves if that bond package was written properly.
I'm very near and dear to this. We have been on the winning side of some of these situations, and we've been on the losing side of some of them. And I think there is a sentiment out there that we need to do a much better job of. It's Southern Arizona first. Wherever it lands, it lands. We don't get it if it doesn't come to Southern Arizona. So when we lost Home Goods, I was happy that Home Goods came to Tucson. When we got Target, I was even happier. I mean, it is something that I think that we need to do a better job of. We need to do a better job of selling our community as a community, and the bond is a very good example of us not selling our community and being proactive in that. And shame on all of us for not getting out there, not getting our employees involved, not getting our vendors involved, and insisting that they support those things. Now, I agree with Bill, the bond was a complicated package, and that probably was a big part of that process. But it's going to come back. The whole Sun Corridor route that goes from, which now improved the aerospace, is done all the way over to I-10 from I-19. I mean, we got to figure out a way to get that done. It's important to our community, and I think the growth coming out of Mexico is something that we should take advantage of, that we're not as well as we could, and also the opportunity to take jobs out of California, where our cost competitiveness is much better than theirs, and that's very fertile grounds for us to mine.